Men of Stone, Chapter 15. The stiffness in my hand brought it all back. It was still early enough to make it to school, but I didn't know if I had the energy. I felt like Gulliver, strapped to the ground by thousands of Lilliputian ropes. So I just lay there. I could hear the house's regular morning noises. Joni calling for Mad to get out of the bathroom, Beth blending something in the kitchen, Mum grinding her beans for her coffee. Maybe if I'd just stayed there, they'd all leave, and I could spend the day watching television and pretending that my life didn't actually suck. But then Mum poked her head in the door. For some reason, I grabbed the postcard and pulled it under the covers. I don't think she noticed. Don't even think about staying home today, Ben. I was just getting up. She stood there in her teacher clothes, looking very put together, but it was a costume. She was as unsure as anybody when it came right down to it. And right now there was a canyon of uncertainty hollowed out between us. Then Beth called her to the phone. She picked up in the hall. "I got it," she called out. Through the open doorway I could hear her end of the conversation. I strained to hear, wondering if it was Miss Spoleto with news. Maybe Stan had come home. "Oh, Jim. Hi. Yes, fine," she said. I wondered what it would take before she'd say, "To tell you the truth, things are pretty rotten." She just chatted amicably, and her voice changed. "Oh, no, I couldn't. I have my aunt visiting, and, well, I'm so busy studying. But thanks for asking." Had this guy asked her out on a date? At 8 in the morning? From the sudden chill in her voice, I'd put money on it. This was too weird. She hadn't dated anyone, ever. It never even entered my mind that she might want to. Maybe if she'd seemed interested, it would have occurred to me, but... She put the phone down, and I thought I heard a sigh. Regret? Or just tiredness? As I walked to the bathroom, she was still standing by the phone. "Who was that?" She looked surprised to see me. "How's your hand?" She sounded concerned. "Fine. Who was on the phone?" She looked at the telephone like it might have an answer on it. "Oh, that. Just someone from school." "It was nothing. I need to get going, Ben, but we'll talk more after school, okay?" I grunted and closed the bathroom door behind me. If she didn't want to talk about my life, why should I tell her about mine? At breakfast, Aunt Frida said that she needed to start thinking about going home. She said she didn't want to overstay her welcome. It jarred me to think of her leaving, which was funny since I hadn't really wanted her to come. But now her leaving would add another hole to our already punctured house. "But you still need to show me how to make Zauberach," said Beth. "And Platz," added Mad. "And those funny-looking peppermint cookies," chimed Joni. "Peppermint Kuchen." Joni tried out the words, and Aunt Frida laughed. "She's teaching me Platosch," Joni told me, breaking her vow of silence. I kept eating my cereal. They'd all become so cozy. Aunt Frida had been accepted into the club. She and I had spent all the time together in the beginning, but now she was one of them. My chest tightened and I couldn't get any more food down. I pushed my bowl away. "I can stay a few more days, but then I really must get going," Aunt Frida insisted. They offered more reasons why she should stay, but eventually they left and the house was quiet. I should get going too, but I made no move to get up. "Why did you leave that picture beside my bed?" I heard myself ask. "I wanted you to know how your father saw your mother. Well, I figure he must have loved her. I mean, she can hardly say his name without getting all choked up." Her eyes grew sad. "Sometimes I think that type of love, it's especially hard on the children." I wasn't even going to pretend that I understood. "I really have to go. I'm going to be late." School was a blur of t-shirts and backpacks and noise. I kept watching faces as I went from class to class. Who knew what anyone was really thinking at any given time? I saw Melody with her friends, and they looked happy, but then they always did. Was it possible that they were always happy? Max Ton's face flew by with that look of intense concentration, like maybe there was something more he just should be doing. Some other book he could be reading if only he had to waste precious minutes transporting himself place to place. Kat caught my eye across the cafeteria. She gave me a sweet smile, but it just made me sad about what would never be. Mostly I was feeling dead inside, and I could see how a person might want to stay that way. I couldn't face history, and I knew I was guaranteeing myself a failing grade by skipping yet another class, but I did it anyways. I went to the park instead, sat there on the bench like a homeless person until it started to rain. Beth created a feast of borscht and buns for supper. Mennonite night, she called it, in honor of Aunt Frida's many cooking classes. Aunt Frida pronounced the meal to be as good as all the ancestors combined could have created. And Beth beamed. Mad prattled on about her commercial, and even Joni seemed happy, eating farmer sausage without preaching of the evils of animal fat. Mum kept glancing over at me, but I mostly kept my head down, dunking the still-warm buns in the broth. After dinner, Mom asked me into the living room. She started right in. "I spoke with your history teacher today, Ben." "Shepherd," I froze. He had told her about the day of the fight, the details. He thinks you know who beat you up, although he didn't feel he could divulge that information to me. Is that why this fight what this fight in the gym and the rock throwing is about? Are you afraid of this boy? My mother, Sherlock Holmes, finally asking some questions, but I didn't have any answers for her. You told me you didn't see who hurt you. I assumed you were telling the truth. Now I don't know what to believe, Ben. Help me understand. Her eyes were pleading, but they didn't move me. I kept thinking about what Aunt Frida had said, about how much my mom and dad loved each other, about how hard it was on the kids. Maybe Mom never loved me. Maybe she couldn't. Maybe she had no love left. So I just felt confused, like I didn't know what she wanted from me. Ben, say something. It was an order. Maybe she was just ticked off that I hadn't told her the truth. A technicality. I felt bad and I didn't. Being quiet was the only thing I could do, so at least it was honest. Maybe I would even want her to be angry, yell and scream at me, show something. Instead, she left. Later that night, I went to Aunt Frida's bedroom. She was sitting by the window with her big black book open across her knees. Come in, Ben. I was just thinking about you. I sat down on her bed. I wondered what this room would be like when she left. Somehow she'd managed to put her mark on it without changing a thing. Even Joni's picture looked less scary with the old lady here. I haven't told you yet when my nightmares ended. I smiled. Another bedtime story. Let me see. I told you about my dream, and that was in the prison with the guard. I nodded, looking into her deeply lined face, aged by her stories. I thought I could see my father's features in her face, the same image I'd seen at the gym the day I fought Alex. And then I could hear my old dance teacher's voice. The most useful images are drawn from your most familiar memories. But my father's face wasn't a familiar memory. I could hardly remember anything about him. Ben? I'm listening. After that dream about the guard, I stopped having the nightmares about the lice. I was still alone and still waiting. But the hatred and rage, they were gone. But Aunt Frida, you still have those nightmares. Here in this house, you've had them. Maybe a person can never forget that kind of thing. Or the hatred. The words spilled out of my mouth. Oh, Ben, one never forgets. Of course not. The events of a person's life become a part of who they are. It would be like forgetting the sound of your beating heart. Then what's the point? I blurted out, and I could hear Alex saying, You've missed the point. She sighed. I've had a good life, Ben, even with all the horror, or maybe because of it. I've learned what joy is. The years I had with Henry in Canada after he was released. Finding my brother Benjamin and his family again. My son. Meeting Jacob's bride. I've had years and years of happiness. Then why do you still have the nightmares? The impatience of youth, she smiled. Man, Bangle, you want everything to make sense right now. But how could I lie to you and say that everything is good and fine when we both know life is not that simple? When I came here to your home and found a shattered place, lives wandering in so many different directions, I went back to a time in my life when I also wandered. My dreams remembered. I think I was dreaming them for you. But how? Why? You didn't even know me. We're family. I felt you needed to hear my story, and I needed to know yours. I know you've sat beside my bed when I've had nightmares. And we both knew she'd sat beside mine. Hatred is like a fire, Ben. It warms you at first, but eventually it burns more and more of you, your very soul. For years I fostered that kind of hatred. It filled every part of me, but at such a high cost. Why? What did it cost? Aunt Frida stroked the book in her lap in silence. It cost me my son, she said softly. I thank God now that he left when he did with the Rumpel family. They were able to raise him with the love I had no room for. A heart can only hold so much. You were glad your son was gone? I looked at her shocked. She was sticking a knife between my ribs. Maybe it was me personally she was talking about. Of course not, she shook her head sadly. It broke my heart. Then how? What? I struggled for words. A heart full of hatred is numb, but a broken heart is felt right to the quick, and a broken heart can be mended. How? I remember the faith of my people, a faith that could only fill an empty vessel, and by then, Man Bagel, I was empty. I don't get it, I said. I'm sorry, I just don't. You will, Ben. Remember what you taught when you taught me to dance? Yeah? You told me to find the music. You were talking about notes and melodies, were you? Not exactly. You were talking about the rhythm that beats deep inside you, the rhythm that guides your steps, yes? It seemed so long ago that I'd said those words. When was the last time I'd felt anything guiding me? Do you ever feel really, really old, Aunt Frida? I asked, but as soon as words came out, I could hear how stupid they sound. I've never felt as old as I did when the hatred ruled my life. These wrinkles are just a disguise. She smiled broadly. "Some days now, when I watch a beautiful sunrise, or the day I danced, I feel as if I'd just been born." I watched her eyes, clear and sparkling and still young. Joni walked into the room then, and I just about fell off my chair. She was dressed in a bright blue sweater. I hadn't seen her in anything but black for as long as I can remember. "Can you sit for me now, Aunt Frida?" Aunt Frida squeezed my hand as she stood. "Joni's painting my portrait. I'm going to be famous." "Like Whistler's mother," she grinned. "You're painting actual people now, Joni?" I asked, surprised. "Only actual people." End of chapter 15.